Well, thanks for being a part of the program tonight. So, a little behind in the times. I have been away for a while, but so I'd like to talk about a few things that, some people have been talking about already. Got into a discussion in recent weeks about polygamy. That came from a discussion about Andrew Tate, which a lot of political people on the conservative side are taking a liking to, foolishly so. And also, what about the Chosen TV series? A lot of people are watching that. This is a very popular series. So should Christians be watching it? That's the question people are asking. And so we'll talk about some of these things. So don't go anywhere.
Commentary, discussion, Bible teaching, and more with A.K. Richardson.
Please hear and learn. All right, so I've been away for several months, but I'm glad to be back. Glad for the opportunity that the Lord gives me to do these kinds of things and speak my mind and talk about the Bible and these issues that people are talking about in society and culture, and speak about them from a Christian perspective. So now, just a little bit later in the program, I'll tell you about an upcoming debate I have with Dr. James White and a couple of other things. So keep listening for that. Now, so this is the first time in a long time I'm doing this, so I'm hoping that a lot of the audio goes well, all that kind of thing. So we'll see how it goes. But now, so having been gone for so long, now there was a lot going on in society and the culture and being talked about in a lot of places while I was not doing anything. And I was seeing these things and I was thinking, that would be good to talk about, really, actually. I saw lots of these things. And I said, I'd love to talk about that. And of course, from a biblical perspective, because that's what we're doing. But nevertheless, we are here now. So I know, when it comes to Andrew Tate and the Chosen, people have been talking about these things for quite a while now. And I'm not going to say too much about Andrew Tate. But really, he's kind of a segue to a few things I want to talk about and show from the Bible about polygamy. Now, that seems like a strange thing, I suppose. I mean, it seems like I don't see polygamy as a big issue unless you're talking about Mormonism, unless you're talking about Islam. Of course, Andrew Tate is Islam, of course. And I think fits, that's the typical thing people will associate with Muhammad, marrying multiple women. And so, Andrew Tate is big on having babies with all kinds of different women. But so, anyway, I was responding to a tweet. This is several weeks ago now from Andrew Tate. I mean, not personally, not like he was talking to me. But it had to do with this common thing that he talks about, which is manpower, have as many babies, as many women as you can, that kind of foolishness. And I got into a discussion. Well, it wasn't really a discussion, but people started commenting on Facebook in response to the tweet that I had posted. And I posted my tweet in response to this on Facebook, and several people in the side chat, even from the Christian community, were saying, well, polygamy, we look at it from a Western thing, and, it's not really condemned in the Bible as a sin, this kind of thing. Well, I was kind of surprised by some of the things that were said there, so I wanted to talk about it. And so that's really what this is. It's using Andrew Tate once again to segue, but I have a few comments on him. And then you have the Chosen TV series. Now, this has become very popular. This guy that plays Jesus is all over, in different talk shows and podcasts now. And, I'll have some thoughts on that because not that Christian commenters on YouTube or what may be haven't said a lot already, but I'll have my comments. But let's talk about the polygamy and the Andrew Tate thing. Now, here's the thing. Drew Costin in the audience. Yeah, it's been a long time, Drew. Nice to see you in the side chat. I am still alive, as far as I know. No, God be thanked, though, for that. But, so Andrew Tate, Now, I'm not so interested in talking too much about Andrew Tate here. I just got a couple things, and then, like I said, the segue. But Andrew Tate is extremely popular on social media, has been for quite some time, and of course he got into that. He got arrested for alleged sex crimes, and I don't know a whole lot about those things, so I'm not going to say too much. Of course, he claims he's innocent. I don't know, but I'd be shocked if he was innocent because of what I know about him and the things he says, but I don't know. I don't know much about that, so I'm not commenting on his charges and all that. But he's extremely popular on social media. And, I guess a lot of conservative politicians like to shoot themselves in the feet and take a liking to him. And you got lots of people that talk to him and like him and all this kind. Candace Owens. Now, again, let me say that why talk about this? What do Christians care? The fact of the matter is Christians are influenced by the culture. That's just the fact of the matter. And maybe not an overwhelming amount of Christians that I've seen are influenced by Andrew Tate. But what I always do this thing where I take popular things in culture, society, and I use them as object lessons, and from a biblical perspective. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm a Bible teacher, and we don't only do Bible teaching here. We talk about these things and analyze them and comment on them, as was said in the opening, right? But you do have a lot of these very popular conservatives, whom a lot of Christians watch. You have Candace Owens. She has taken a liking to him to some degree. He was on the Tucker Carlson program, and somebody from the Trump administration, I can't remember who now, I saw it some weeks ago, she was talking to him, and so, of course, conservatives like him because he says a lot of anti-woke things. If you don't know what woke is, it's just a lot of the. Well, I'm not going to comment on what woke is right now, but it's most of the older generations that don't know what that is, and that's fine if you don't know what woke is. You're not missing out if you don't know what woke is. But so he says a lot of things that are anti-woke, right? He talks about empowering men. Now, the reason a lot of what he says resonates with the conservatives, I'm talking about the political people, and even with some Christians, is because of the bashing that men have taken. Now, what all this is very important for is the fact that God created the family as the foundation of society. And a lot of these toxic movements in culture right now are aimed at and attacking the family and this foundation that is the family. All this transgender nonsense that has been going on and is kind of on the downhill now. And because the recent turn of tides with the election has showed that most people still don't buy into the nonsense of transgenderism. But the transgenderism, the homosexual movement, and the feminism movement, and a lot of the atheist movement as well as part of this, are really attacking men and attacking women who want to be stay-at-home moms and mothers and motherhood in general. And so a lot of it is attacking this thing. And some of the things he says about empowering men resonates with a lot of people because, like I said, the attack on men. But then you listen to everything else he says, and he's not empowering men. He's turning his vision of men is having a nice car, smoking a cigarette, with your top buttons unbuttoned on your shirt and your chest hair sticking out for everybody to see you and looking, macho, and then getting as many women as you can. And that's what he's openly endorsed for some time. If you listen to his tweets or read his tweets and listen to the things he says, having babies with as many women as you can. And his whole shtick that he had with, some university that he opened or something was getting women to sleep with him so that he can influence them and use them. You can watch his videos, you can see him saying these things. So why conservative political people take a liking to him. Well, I could just tell you, because a lot of them don't think from a Christian perspective. That's certainly true. PC follower, thanks for being a part. Diane, good to see you again. I'll speak about my James White debate a little bit later. That's what she was asking about. So anyway, so this is Andrew Tate's show. And by the way, he did say he was a Christian. He knows nothing about Christianity. I haven't seen him say anything to indicate he knows anything about Christianity. I've seen him say the opposite, in fact. But now he's a Muslim. Probably not a good one at that. But I can see him fitting in with Islam very well because of some of his mentality. So he keeps up this one thing. Now, first of all, I've heard him, he's said several things about Christians need to rise up. They need to enforce their morals, or they're going to lose the culture. They're losing the culture war. They're being oppressed. They need to stand up for what they believe in so that their morals can be elevated and magnified. Well, first of all, if Christianity is magnified, people like him, they shrink, because there's nothing about this kind of individual that has anything in common with Christianity. You want to be a real man, learn from Jesus Christ. Now, I'll also say that a lot of segments of so-called Christianity have turned Jesus into, something that he's not as well. So, he posted a tweet, and I responded to it. And so let me pull it up, and if you're listening, I will read it as well. Now, I don't subscribe to him, but I saw it moving around. So this is from February 16th. But he says, if all your children come from one woman, you are not a conqueror. Besides the spelling there, that's pretty accurate as far as what he commonly says. So this is him. This is his vision of what manhood is about. Now, I just tweeted that God disagrees, considering monogamy is his idea. I'll trust his wisdom over such foolishness any day. The young men, Republicans, and Christians who look to you for guidance are headed for the ditch. It's blind leading blind. This is the last person to be following. And the fact that some people endorse him to some extent, because a lot of people don't think like Christians, that's for sure. But now, again, this is not to say that everything Andrew Tate says is wrong. Of course, that's always the thing. I mean, people say lots of wrong things, but usually I don't know too many people that only say wrong things, of course, right? And by the way, if you're thinking, well, who is Andrew Tate? Well, again, not a big deal. He's this very popular, as I said, social media personality. He was a kickboxer. He opens up this online school or whatever kind of school for webcams, and his use of women to do that, teaching young men or men how to make money the easy way. If you pay him, you go into this university and they school you, that kind of thing. All this kind of stuff that you could see this guy coming a mile away if you got any ounce of prudence. But so that's what he is. And it's kind of like when a lot of conservatives were, and by the way, I'm hoping my video don't freeze. I saw that happening in my test runs. What are you going to do? Well, we'll just see how that goes. But it's kind of like a lot of conservatives for a while were embracing Kanye West. And he was supposed to be a Christian there for a while, and everybody was saying, well, yeah, no, let him be a Christian. I mean, this is a good thing. And he was even Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen had him on his live program, brought him to his church. And it was just very awkward, by the way. And I remember Ben Shapiro, he's a social commentator. He said, he was kind of warning Trump, I think it was at the time, if you live by the Kanye, you're going to die by the Kanye. That's very true. Now, I wasn't out there just saying, my hope was that he would become a Christian and that the things that he was looking for or saying that he looked for is Kanye. were true, and that he would keep coming towards the Christian path. But everything I saw in him indicated, no, I mean, he's not there yet. And it's not, and sure enough, I mean, look where he went. I mean, he bombed on that, wasn't a Christian at all. Or if he had become one, he wasn't one for very long because his heart wasn't there. And so that didn't do the politicians any good either. And we all saw that coming. Well, if we were paying attention once again. But so a lot of political people are doing that with Andrew Tate. But, well, anyway, so this is his mantra. This is his mentality here. Just have as many babies as you can. Now, of course, I think, should I have to say it? What I'm not talking about, of course, is, remarrying, of course, and then having more children when you're remarried legitimately. There's legitimate remarriages, despite our Catholic friends. And so I'm not talking that kind of thing. But this idea to just multiply with as many women, and that's his idea. If your children come from one woman, you are not a conqueror. Oh, but I disagree. So anyway, I said this, that God disagrees, considering monogamy is his idea. And so I got several comments to this, and I wasn't involved too much. I don't get too heavy into the online chats and comments. Listen, I'm just going to tell you. I will occasionally respond to comments on YouTube and Facebook more so, especially if it's a topic that I bring up, but even then, not too much. And I just don't get the time. And by the way, Facebook itself, I got to say, it's getting to that point, and I said this at some point, and I've been consistent with it to some degree, but the number of people that reach out to me and try to ask me questions, it just increases and increases, and I just don't have time. I mean, the point is, I don't respond to everybody. I try to still respond, but the point is going to come where I'm still going to try, or I'm still going to have to just not respond to lots of people. Of course, unless I'm telling people reach out to me for such and such a thing, that's different. But I'm just warning you guys out there, I just can't talk too much on the social media platforms. But nevertheless, so they were commenting, and a couple of different people, like, were downplaying the significance of, monogamy. Now, they were not all saying untrue things, and that's what we're going to get to now. And then we're going to get to the chosen idea. But, so let's pull this up. Now, some were saying, well, polygamy is never condemned as a sin in the New Testament or the Bible, they would say, and it was obviously tolerated in the Old Testament, and this is a very Western way of looking at it. Well, first of all, there's some truth to that. Now, obviously, not only was polygamy tolerated in the Old Testament, I mean, it was enforced in some cases. Levirate marriages, and under the Mosaic system, because inheritance rights were so significant, land promises and everything else. And the passing on of inheritance and your name is so important. One of the laws from God through Moses was that if a man's brother died without children and his left behind widow, well, so the brother would be required to marry the widow, even if he was already married, marry the widow, and then have children in his brother's name, so that his brother's name would not cease to be, And so in some cases, polygamy was even commanded. And in some cases, God gave, like to David and Solomon, lots of women. And I think there was reasons for that. And by the way, that was not without its cost. If you remember Solomon, you can read in Chronicles there where it says when Solomon was old, and he had lots of wives and concubines. Concubines were like a lesser wife. But it says when he was old that his wives turned away his heart from following the Lord. They turned away his heart to other gods, their gods, because they were pagan women. And, so that became a problem in his older age. So the idea of polygamy is, it was not necessarily always sinful. That's true. Now, so here's the idea. Understanding that, when we come to Jesus, the Christian is supposed to be concerned with Jesus mentality on marriage. I recognize that you're going to have people that are not Christians, who become Christians, who've lived in other ways. Even to this day, the people abroad that marry multiple women. So you'd have to discuss what they were doing. I believe if you become a Christian and you have multiple wives, you still got responsibilities to protect them and to, you can't just say, all right, away with you. I mean, when they've been looking to you for their support and whatnot. But so setting those things aside, what I want to get to, which was really at the heart of the discussion I was having, was, but we as Christians, what is Christ's mentality? Because the people that were commenting, at least some of them, are supposed to be Christians. And I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying I don't know a whole lot about them, really. I don't know half the people that are my friends, list on Facebook. But so that's the issue, is they were supposed to be Christians. And I thought, well, some of the things you're saying is true. It was not a sin in the Old Testament. And but they never got to the heart of what we as Christians, though. Now we have Christ to listen to, and what is his mentality? And that's what I want to look at. And I'm going to start here in Ephesians 5, because this is not where people typically go, at least in my experience. Chris Lucas in the audience. Hey, Chris, thanks for being there. I'm going to go here because the typical verses people would go to, well, I'm going to go to some of them as well, but I'm going to go here first just because this is not usually where people go. Well, here in Ephesians 5, Paul the Apostle, talking about roles of husbands and wives. Ephesians 5, verse 25, he says this, he says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, despite modern philosophy, which says that people got to they got to learn to love themselves before they could love other people. No, everybody loves themselves. I'm here to tell you. I don't want to get sidetracked here, but everybody loves themselves. Everybody eats, tries to, take care of themselves to some extent. The things that they like, they try to engage in. I mean, even people that commit suicide, usually they commit suicide, and I'm not trying to scrutinize every reason that some people commit suicide. You got children that they're abused and they're so lost because they're children, But here's my point. Everybody even that commits suicide because they don't want to continually face whatever problems they're facing. They want to be done with. Well, that is an interest in one's own self to some extent, and so nobody hates themselves. It's just a reality. Anyway, I had to say that. But okay, so now, first of all, so we're reading here where Paul's telling husbands what to do, and he's saying you need to love your wives in such way as Christ loves the church. So there's a comparison that Paul makes here of the church to one's wife. Very much so, right? Do this to your wife just as Christ did to his church. Now, this is not, of course, Paul's own thinking. I mean, we have this throughout the New Testament. We have it in Revelation where it talks about the bride of the Lamb. Well, that's the church. Throughout the Bible, and as far as Christ goes, the New Testament, you do have where the church, Christ's people, are said to be his bride. He that has the bride is the bridegroom. That's what John said, and that's Jesus, right? Well, in the Old Testament, when he had his covenant people Israel, he continually called them his wife, that they were married. So this is the relationship, right? Okay, now why do I bring this up? Well, it gets even deeper than that, because Paul says in verse 29 here, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, continually comparing Christ and the church. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Now notice that he cites the institution of marriage in Genesis. At least what is to happen because of the institution of marriage. He cites what was said about the result of that institution. And then in verse 32, he says, this mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Now, that's interesting. Adrian, thanks for being a part. Now, what is a mystery? Now, if you don't know, in the New Testament, when it speaks about mysteries, consistently it means revelation from God that had been kept secret, that had not been revealed. It wasn't revelation, right? If it's not revealed, it's not revelation. But now is revealed. So hidden truths or unspoken truths, they were called mysteries. You can find several occasions like that. 2 Corinthians 2, he talks about that. And Jesus talked about the mysteries kept secret from the foundation of the world. So when he says a mystery, he means here's something that was hidden, but is a truth now revealed by God. And what is that mystery here? Now, I say all that because we tend to, because it calls it a mystery, we think, well, it's mysterious, hard to understand, right? Well, no, that's not what he means. As I said, in biblical language, in the New Testament language, a mystery was a hidden truth, but now it's revealed. And because this is an important point, let me just go to Ephesians 3, just a couple chapters earlier. Paul was talking about the church still here in his ministry to the Gentiles. He says, for this reason, I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus, on behalf of you Gentiles, if indeed you heard the stewardship of God's grace, which was given to me for you, that by revelation there was made known to me the mystery, as I wrote before in brief, about which when you read, you can understand my insight into the mystery of Christ, which in other generations, now here's an explanation of what a mystery is in the New Testament, which in other generations was not made known to the sons of men, as it is now revealed to his holy apostles and prophets in the Spirit. So, you see, it's a mystery in the sense that in other generations it was not known, but now is revealed. So it's not a mystery anymore. And it doesn't have to do with things that are mysterious, as we would say, but hidden truths, but they're now revealed by the apostles. Okay, so counterpoint apologetics. Good to see you. All right, so we come here back to chapter 5 where we were. And he says, for this mystery is great, but I'm speaking with reference to Christ and the church. It is a mystery. You know what it really is? And he just cited the institution of marriage, or what was said in response to the institution of marriage from Genesis. He's saying that, and this is a big subject, I realize that, but I'm going to say it, and I got a whole video on typology. You should go look it up. Typology. What he's saying is the institution of marriage, I mean, it serves many purposes for man and society and in this culture. But one spiritual truth about it that has been revealed is that it symbolizes Christ and his church. That it's a picture of Christ and his church. He's saying that's a mystery. So the Holy Spirit through the apostles has revealed in the Christian age that there was something else about marriage, something very significant, and dare I say, and it's not difficult to say, I guess it's not much of a dare, even one of its most important aspects is that marriage visualizes, symbolizes Christ and his bride, the church. And by the way, when I said go look up typology, I don't know that I talked about this particular subject, but it's important to talk about typology in the Old Testament and picturing things in the New. This is by the inspired apostle. And so it gets down to this. God may have tolerated and used it for certain purposes in the Old Testament, but it wasn't the ideal. It wasn't what he really wants. And I know that from what Christ says. We're going to look at that in here in a second. But how many brides does Christ have? How many churches does he have? I'm not talking about groups, denominations. I mean, the whole church, his people as a group. How many does he have? Well, the Bible's pretty clear about that. In fact, Ephesians, once again, the previous chapter, it says there is one body, and the body is the church, Paul says, like in Colossians, the body which is his church. There's one body, one people. So if you're a Christian and you downplay monogamy, you're downplaying the image, the ideal image God has for symbolizing Christ and his church. Now, again, I realize, and I'm not saying that it was always a sin or that it wasn't tolerated. It obviously was. But it's not the ideal. It's not what God wants. And it's most importantly not what Christ wants. And if you are a Christian, you have to be concerned with what Christ wants. Yeah, so I realize that if you're a mid-Acts guy, you believe in other churches, that kind of thing, but it's a whole different subject. I disagree with mid-Acts. Drew knows that, of course. Okay, so now I got some other scriptures to go to, but nevertheless, let me say this. So, I got to say, I have been gone, but I'm going to speak here in just a second about my upcoming debate with James White. Shannon Herring, good to see you. But so what I'm planning to do is, as best as I can, as much as God allows me at the time, I'm going to try to do this weekly, this podcast. And so if you like to listen to podcasts, I haven't put them out there yet, but I am going to be sending my podcast to rss.com. That's a podcasting platform. And so if everything works the way it should be and planned, you should be able to hear this and listen to it on podcast platforms such as Spotify, Amazon, Apple, of course, rss.com, which is where I'm going. And I'm going to try that out, test it out, because I'm new to the podcasting scene. Of course, we do this live. I've done this before, but so spread the news. Once you see it out there, and I'm planning on sending it out there audio-wise and staying live here, video-wise, but spread the word, the podcast. Also, you could look for me on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I hate the name X. Don't get me started on that. Twitter, it's x.com. AK Richardson 2. There was already an AK Richardson, so AK Richardson 2. Just look for me there and spread the word about that. And so I think I do got an Instagram. I just don't know much about it. Don't get into it that much, but look for me on there as well. And anyway, I ask you to spread the word about the YouTube channel as well, because the more people come to it, the more it pops up in search engines and whatnot. And so I appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe if you appreciate the content. And so there is that. So anyway, also, so my debate with James White, I'm going to get back to the content here in just a second, but my debate with James White. Okay, so I got an in-person debate with Dr. James White. He's a very well-known Calvinist apologist, and he's very good in many areas, and he does a lot of good things, but I disagree with him very much on his Calvinism. So there's going to be a debate on Romans chapter 9. That's what we're debating, a passage. Does it teach Calvinism? So it's going to be in Calhoun, Louisiana, April 10th, 6 p.m. Central Time. Now, it will be sent out live. The host said that he would send me the link for the live channel about a week out. And their YouTube channel, the ones hosting it, is, I think, the Parish of the Redeemer, Trey Fisher. You can look that up. So that's going to be happening. All right. That's right. The algorithm for 8 months doesn't do well, does it? That's right. Okay, so now let's get back into this. And then also, remember, we're going to be talking, I got some comments on The Chosen. What part of Calvinism? Well, basically all of the tulip I disagree with. What is the debate on? Well, it's on Romans 9, which more has to do with unconditional election. All right. So Matthew chapter 19. And again, my emphasis is what? I mean, it's fine to say what is the truth. It was permitted in the Old Testament, commanded at times, but Christ has come and set the bar to what God wants. Now, how do I know that? And if we are Christians, we have to be concerned with what He wants. Now, he was asked a question about divorce. Now, there's a principle involved here that is going to be a lesson to be learned here, right? Even though we're not really talking about divorce, but we're going to see something important here. Now, some Pharisees came to Jesus. They asked him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? And he answered and said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. Now, what is Jesus doing here? Jesus cites the institution in the beginning, just like Paul did, by the way, that we just read. What Jesus is saying is he's saying, what did God intend with marriage? What was his point? What was his purpose? Well, he created two people. Now, when we're talking about homosexuals, we get this, right? That old cliche joke, he created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And why do we say that joke? Because the point is, how he created the institution demonstrates what it's supposed to be and what he expects of it. Now, that I realize it went way beyond that in the Old Testament. And by the way, polygamy didn't really start. And this is a whole discussion I don't have time for. And let me see. I may go back to that point, but let me just continue here. Jesus is citing the institution and saying, look at the design, what was meant, and we know what God wants. And that's what Jesus wants. And so if you're a Christian, you have to be concerned with what Jesus wants. And it's fine to say it was tolerated, it was permitted, it was even commanded. But if you're a Christian, you're supposed to turn around and echo Christ and say, but God wants it this way. God wants it this way if you are his disciple, Christ. Because that's what he's saying, the two. And then they said, well, but Moses gave commands to give certificates of divorce if they divorced. He said, because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it has not been this way. In other words, it got off from what God designed. And God, I believe, like he does many things, he uses what man does and uses it for certain functions and for certain purposes, and that's the way that it is. But Christ comes along and says, here's what I am concerned with, and that is the original intent and design of marriage. And Christ was not ignorant of the Old Testament, by the way. I mean, he was, I believe, as a Trinitarian, that he was the one revealing all that even in the Old Testament times. But, of course, everything has its time and purpose. Christ comes along to raise the bar to God's ideal. And if you're a Christian, you are not to be looking for less than Christ's ideal. Because a Christian, you know what a Christian is? In the book of Acts, it says the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Disciples were people that followed the teaching of Christ. His disciples were his followers. So according to the Bible, a Christian is someone who follows Christ. So if you're a Christ, you have to think about what Christ wants. And Christ is Lord. And that's what salvation is, by the way, is subjection to the Lord. You know, in Acts chapter 16, when the Gentile jailer asked Paul, what do I do to be saved? Paul said, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved. Well, the Lord implies, well, if you're going to trust in the Lord, you got to subject yourself. It makes no sense to say, I trust in him as Lord, but I'm not going to subject myself to him. If that's the case, what do you trust about him being Lord? What is it that you trust? So subjection is salvation. To be in the kingdom is salvation. That's what it says in Matthew chapter 19, by the way, same chapter, actually. And I could prove that very easily. And so, if you're not worried about being subjected to Christ and his thoughts, well, you're not doing things consistently. And you're supposed to be, and that's our role as Christians. And there's been other verses. You know, one is 1 Corinthians 7, which I don't think is a bad one at all. Now, Paul says, now concerning the things about which you wrote, talking about the Corinthians, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. This is talking about, if I may say, what's the word? Starts with an E, and I hate when that happens. And that happens to me a lot. I think if you remember watching this program, these common words that just slip. Euphemism. That's what I'm speaking euphemistically. But a euphemism, he's talking about sleeping with a woman. So it's good, but to stay single and not do that. But because of sexual immoralities, fornication is the better word, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. Yeah, that doesn't strike at polygamy, does it? And so that's the case. Now, and even in the list for qualifications to be a leader in the church, an elder, he says he must be the husband of one wife. So, Joey Chopper, good to see you. It's great to be back, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming here and saying that. So, someone says the original purpose design has its flaws. Well, I don't think the original purpose has its flaws. I will say this. Now, of course, the original design was instituted in paradise in a sinless world, of course. Now, if that's what you mean, I can agree, because here's the problem. Well, now you got death. That ends marriage, of course. It was to be for life. Of course, death ends it. And therefore, it is okay to remarry, the Bible says, after the death of a spouse. So, that's a part of the original design, can't be instituted to its fullest, of course, because we live in a sinful world. The other thing is because we live in a sinful world, there is adultery. And that is one reason the Bible gives in Matthew 19, and we just read it, for remarriage. And so, because a person is joining themselves to somebody else, breaking their vows, committing perjury. So, that is about polygamy. And so, I realize not everybody's talking about polygamy, but you got Andrew Tate out there who's talking about this kind of thing, and he's a Muslim. So he says. I don't know what the Muslims think about Andrew Tate, but anyway, they can have him because he's not a good influence. Even if you try to listen to him, he's so filthy, and he's very macho kind of guy. As I said, car, buttons down the shirt and open, when he's exposed the chest. He's smoking a cigar. Always wants to be seen looking cool, that kind of thing. And it's hard to listen to him because he's filthy. He's very brash, just crude more than brash, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, he's a bad influence. If you want to be a man, I would rather, if you're not going to go to a Christian source, and that's what you should go. But if people in the culture are not going to Christian sources, good Christian sources, at least they should go to someone like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro. I'm just saying. Obviously, I say learn from Jesus. He'll teach you how to be a man. But a lot of people out there in the culture aren't going to those sources, unfortunately. And I wish, and I'm just kind of saying somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that if you're not going to go to Christ, if you're not going to go to the New Testament or a solid Bible teacher, at least go to someone like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh. They're much better than someone like Andrew Tate. So, yeah, polygamy, that's no good. We're supposed to be Christians. And now I realize there's other questions you can ask, all that kinds of things, but we're not going to get into that. I want to get into the Chosen thing. So I got some comments on the Chosen. I have seen a couple of episodes. So the Chosen is this really popular TV series now about the life and the Gospels. It's about Jesus, right? CJ Marshall, good to see you. And so that's a very popular show out there, The Chosen. Now, if you think that I'm someone who's going to say you shouldn't be watching this, Christians shouldn't be watching this, well, I'm not that kind of person. I don't typically tell people what to watch and what not to watch. I can say you probably shouldn't be watching it if you don't know much about the Bible. And if you're going to watch it with your kids, make sure you're giving them lots of Bible. And that goes with anything. Now, my family is not Bible ignorant, of course, so, we will watch shows. We started to watch a couple of these, and of course, I'm the person, anyway, if I'm in there and I'm going to say, that's not right, that's not what he did. My wife's the same way, so that's not what it says. let me give you some general comments about Bible shows and Bible movies. First of all, there's not very many good ones out there. I mean, at least this is my opinion. I've recommended before some Bible movies or some Christian type movies, but some general comments. Now, first of all, just about Christian movies in general. There's good Christian movies out there. And when I say Christian movie, I mean movies that are meant to promote, moral and ethics that are found within Christianity and to say good things about the Bible and Christianity. So there's some good ones. Courageous was a good one, and I can't remember all the movies, but Fireproof, I think, was one. Wasn't that one? I mean, I watched it. I just don't really remember. But the one with Kirk Cameron, the one Fireproof, I think he was in Fireproof. And there's several others. I've seen a handful of them, and I've seen several that, that's not my kind of thing. Now, just when it comes to Christian entertainment like this in general, let me say, I can sympathize on one level with bad acting because, Christians and the people that make the Christian movies don't get a lot of money. Can't hire the best of actors. I get it. But that is kind of one of the problems is Christian movies. Now, and then I'm going to get to the meat, the more important stuff here in a minute. But just in general, Christian movies, don't have a lot of good actors. And that's it makes it hard to get into the movie if you don't have good acting. Kirk Cameron was in Left Behind. That is not the movie I'm talking about. I don't recommend that at all. That's based upon things that I don't agree with. Although, as a mid-acts, Drew, I think that I can't remember now. It's been so long. I mean, you guys are dispensational, so that should be right up your alley. But no, it's not. I'm not a dispensationalist, so I don't like the Left Behind movies. But he was in that other movie. So I like Kirk Cameron out there. He's a force for good out there in the popular culture. But a lot of these movies, it's hard to get into because they got bad acting. And there is something to be said. Now, listen, I think what happens a lot is Christian movies, they try to promote, they're trying to preach more than entertain. Now, I get it because that's the primary purpose of a Christian, right, is to preach. That's what our duty is to communicate the truth of God. Absolutely. I mean, but see, here's the problem. When you're making a movie, you're not preaching. I mean, the purpose of a movie is to entertain, unless it's a documentary. So we just have to be real about the kind of category you're involved in. It's not like you're preaching a sermon. It's not like you're doing what I'm doing, which is a podcast. And there's nothing wrong with entertaining, but a movie primarily is to entertain. And so while I'm not opposed at all, of course, I'm in favor of, magnifying good things about Christianity, about God, saying good things about faith, and putting that into your movie. That's a good thing. But not at the cost of the entertainment. And why? Because entertainment's more important than the message? Absolutely not. But when it comes to a movie, that's what a movie is supposed to be. Okay, that's the point of a movie. Now, obviously, preaching and teaching and communicating the things about Christ and the gospel, that's more important than anything. But that's, of course, when you're doing that. But if you're going to put a movie out, you've left the preaching category for the most part, and you're trying to entertain. So the entertainment shouldn't be lost at the value of the message because then people don't watch it anyway. And so I hope people are, understand what I'm saying. Oh, he's saying that it's entertainment's more important than preaching. Now, you know what I'm saying. If you're going to do a movie, and a lot of times this is my criticism of Christian music, so-called, because and I get it, once again, the message. But for me, first of all, my problem, if I listen to K-Love, it all sounds the same. Like all music on K-Love, all Christian artists sound the same. But the primary thing, a lot of Christian music is like the message. And I think it's more important than the message in a movie. But still, since you're making music, a lot of people, Christians, want to be able to listen to something that at least is just not negative or got a bad message. And so put some more emphasis on the music, make it distinct, do something different. And, don't don't just make the music all about the feel of the words. Anyway, I'm getting into a lot of speculation here about opinions, but I think there's some good principles there. But anyway, now having said all that, people are starving for entertainment. You know, there's a lot of good stuff out there. So one of the appeals here, now from what I've seen, it's got pretty good acting. Well, that's going to help. But see, here's the problem with Bible movies that you won't have in just these normal Christian movies like what I was talking about with Fireproof and all that, is because you're taking something that where you're taking a script, for the lack of a better word here, because that's what it becomes for a show. You're taking a story, a message. You're taking information from the Bible. The most important part of that is its message. And especially a movie or a show about Jesus, the most important thing is what is being communicated about the person. But the problem is, what they do is they change so much for the sake of entertainment, for the sake of story and drama. And so often is the case, at the sake and to the detriment of the story, and especially in this case, Jesus himself. Now, I'm okay with some ad-lib. I mean, if a movie can bring in extra dialogue, but it's not difficult. That if you're going to add extra dialogue to fill in the script, to fill in, you know, some of the what you don't have, and if you're making a story in a show, it should be common sense that if you're going to add stuff, don't add stuff that changes the message that is in the Bible, that doesn't contradict it, that doesn't change the personalities, that doesn't change significant concepts and things about what is said. It should be insignificant dialogue that only adds to what is said. And by all means, there's a lot in the Gospels. You can get a lot of it in there. Now, there's some movies, the Gospel of John is one that I'm thinking of, that does nothing but follows the text of the Gospel of John. There's no ad-libbing. And so you got a narrate who will narrate parts that where John is speaking, and then when there's dialogue in the Gospel of John itself, the actors will speak it. And I don't like the translation they use in that movie, but for the most part, it's a good movie. Well, it's one of the better ones. And so that's a decent gospel movie, the Gospel of John. But I don't like most Jesus movies. Now, I've only seen like 2 episodes of The Chosen, but I'm already aware that they've added enough stuff. And I know someone, now this is, I don't know if this is the case. I don't know, Cosmic Septic. Good to see you. Yeah, it's my first podcast in a while. I don't know if this is the case. I can't verify this. I didn't hear him say it, but somebody said that the director said 95% of the movie isn't in the Bible. No, I don't know if that's true or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Now, I know the guy's a Mormon who's directing it, or it's somehow associated with Mormon. I'm not trying to give you the lowdown on the show. I'm only going to give you a few things here because I don't know a lot about it. I'm telling you that up front. But I do know there's some Mormons that are behind it. Now, let me tell you something. The Mormons, they do some good stuff out there. VidAngel, which is a program that I like. You can watch anything you want in VidAngel, which was a program that it would filter out any material you didn't want to hear. Words, scenes. The problem was, it just didn't have a lot of good selections. They only could do so much. So Mormons can do a lot of good material out there. Now, if you watch the show regularly, be mindful and be very knowledgeable about what the Bible actually says about these things, because I'm just here to tell you that these things can influence people when they make movies. Now, let me give you an example. The Passion of the Christ. So that was a decent movie. At least it communicated the crucifixion in a better way than most movies did. Kind of give people, let you know that this wasn't just a slap on the wrist that he got, like in most movies. But you know, Mel Gibson, who directed the movie and wrote it, is a Catholic. And sure enough, you see the Catholic influence in the movie. There was nothing like major. The whole little demon child, I didn't like that at all. And then some of the kids that came up to Judas and their face was mutating. I mean, it's like, please, come on, give me a break with that stuff. But you see the Catholic influence in the movie. For example, everybody's calling Mary mother. Well, that's Catholic. All the disciples, Peter, call her Mary. Why would they call her Mary? She wasn't their mother. And not only that, even in the New Testament, Jesus doesn't refer to her as mother. Because when he enters his ministry, his relationship goes larger than son-daughter. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that relationship. Most of the time he calls her woman. Now, in our day and age, calling a woman would be rude. But that's not the way it was. But the point is, he didn't refer to her mother as mother. But in the Mel Gibson movie, The Passion of the Christ, everybody's calling her mother. That's because that's what Catholics do, of course. And the Shroud of Turin made its way into the movie, by the way. At the end, he put his face in the Shroud of Turin. That's always been promoted by Catholics. It's not something I believe in. I'm not convinced by it. But I thought there was something else, and I can't really remember. Well, even Mary in the movie is taking a super significant role, and, you just see her. I mean, and there was something else, but I can't remember now. But, so the people that make these movies, sometimes their own theology does make its way into the movie, and you just have to be aware of that. So primarily what I'm wanting to tell everybody is be aware that these are just shows. Now, there are some things that I've already seen. Now, first of all, I watched the first couple of episodes. And what I didn't like from the very beginning is they already deviated. It didn't take long for them to deviate from the Bible in places where it's not needed. His first miracle was casting a demon out of Mary Magdalene. It's the first miracle you see him do. The problem is the Gospel of John explicitly tells us that his first miracle was turning water into wine. But that's not what you see in the movie. So why? So that already showed me they were going off. I mean, they were taking too much freedom. Now, I saw I got some clips here, and these may be small, maybe medium, maybe big. But they just tell me, I mean, there's a lot of this in there. So this is a clip from Jesus, who's and his coming up with the Sermon on the Mount. Let's see now, again, I'm hoping the audio comes through. A couple of podcasts. I'm going to try to get this where I don't have to ask every time. But in the side chat, if it doesn't sound good, you can't hear, let me know. And we'll just kind of move on because I don't want to mess with it. So the audio is important for my audio podcast too, by the way. So here we go.
Ready?
Okay, let me, now this is Matthew that he's with here. Now this is supposed to be Jesus, of course. And by the way, from the kind of Jesus you see in the movies, there's a decent looking Jesus. He didn't get the hair that's down to his knees, that kind of thing. I never liked that about movies. That's a tradition of Jesus having long hair. At least here, he does look a little bit more decent. By the way, that movie Jesus of Nazareth, that Jesus was about as feminine as he could be. I mean, it's just so soft and gentle. That comes from this European painting type tradition of Jesus. And I mentioned, I know, you said, you just played the clip. Just at least play it. Well, let me just tell you something. Okay, sound is fine. Thanks, I appreciate that. One more thing. There was another Catholic movie about Jesus. And it showed a scene from when Jesus was a little boy. And it was a little girl. Blue eyes, blonde hair, sounded like a girl, but of course she is dressed, looks like a boy. Why? Because Catholics often have Jesus in that light. The paintings that are so well known in Catholic tradition is a very feminine looking Jesus. So they wanted the little boy to be like that kind of thing. So theology influences the shows by these people. I'm just telling you that. So backing up now, here's Jesus with Matthew, and he's trying to come up with the Sermon on the Mount.
Ready? Have I? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
Now that's odd. So that the Sermon on the Mount is written down. He has Matthew write it down, and I guess he gives it later. But why add that? Because it seems to me that you're communicating something about Jesus that the Bible just doesn't communicate, like he has to come up with these things and write them. He was guided by the Spirit. You know, the interesting thing is when Jesus talked about the apostles and their ministry in the first century, he told them ahead of time, when you go before governors and leaders and important people, don't think about what you're going to say ahead of time. The Holy Spirit will give to you the words that you say. Now, Jesus had the Holy Spirit. So I think it communicates something that the Bible is not communicating about Jesus. It changes significant things. I mean, why? What do you add when you get into that? Now, you can see the acting is real good. I can usually tell right away. I mean, just the facial expressions on Matthew and the way they speak, you got some good acting here. But that doesn't mean the information is good. I'm not telling you not to watch The Chosen. I'm not the person who says it. I'm saying not my kind of thing already. It already gives me reservations for the reason I already said from what I watched of it. Okay, so we got another one. This one I really don't like. But this is Nicodemus. You can read about Nicodemus in John chapter 3 in this interaction. And so Jesus has already been talking to Nicodemus. I got the end of the conversation here. And Nicodemus has been listening. You got some of the things you read in John chapter 3, but then you got this kind of near the end.
Is the kingdom of God really coming?
Is the kingdom really coming?
What does your heart tell you?
Now that's New Age stuff. Now what you're going to see here is very different from the Nicodemus you see in chapter 3. Now, yes, you see Nicodemus kind of conflicted, but the reaction that Nicodemus has here is so significant that it seems like that would have been written in there if it had been anything like that. So it's a very different persona than the Nicodemus and the interaction between Nicodemus and Jesus that you see in John chapter 3. So different that when I look at something like that, I think, no, this is doing more, it's more different than it is the same, if you know what I mean. And so I don't recommend it. But I'm not saying don't watch it. I'm just saying I don't recommend it as a good thing to watch. But yes, that's the next thing. So Nicodemus says, is the kingdom really coming? Which he didn't ask in chapter 3. And then Jesus says, and that's what people notice. Jesus says what Jesus never said in the New Testament. What does your heart tell you? That's something New Age people say. That's something, that's the soft religion. I'll tell you what Jesus said, by the way, about the heart. If Jesus did talk about the heart, don't get me wrong. So what did Jesus have to say? What kind of things did Jesus actually say about the heart? Well, let's see. You have this kind of thing. He said, Peter's asking him about something he said earlier. Now, this is Matthew 15. I'm not going to talk about what he talked about earlier. He just said it's not what goes into the man, but what comes out of him. And what did he mean? Well, Peter wants to ask. And in verse 16, it says, and Jesus said, are you still lacking in understanding also? Do you not understand that everything that goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and goes into the sewer, but the things that proceed out of the mouth come from the heart? And those defile the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, thefts, false witness, slanders. These are the things which defile man. Now, Jesus isn't saying, all Jesus is saying, the things that really matter, what come from the heart. But you notice that a lot of the things he mentioned are evil things. The Bible doesn't have, for example, in Proverbs, here's what it says. It says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end is the way of death. The heart has to be educated, the mind. But that's certainly not the way Jesus spoke. What does your heart tell you? See, that changes changes the what is being communicated. That shapes and shifts the personality of the characters in the New Testament. I say characters, the people, the Jesus and the disciples. That's very strange to me. Why put that in there? You got a lot of good information and dialogue from Jesus in the first place. But it didn't stop there.
What does your heart tell you?
My heart is swollen with fear and want. It can tell me nothing except that I am standing on holy ground. Holy roof and
I do hope you come with us, Nicodemus.
Did you catch that? It's very quiet. Jesus said something there, and I'm just a little surprised that they have it so quiet. In fact, he says two things. You could barely hear it. I had to go back and listen to it. And even on my YouTube, now I don't know if this is just coincidence or what, but I put the captions on my YouTube, and it would bring up what they were saying except for those two things, and it left them out. I don't know what that was about, but I'm back it up. Nicodemus is bowing down and grabbing Jesus' hand, which didn't happen. We were not told that in John 3. But you got to listen very carefully. And I don't know how to make it louder for you. It's so quiet. But listen very carefully and hear what two things Jesus is going to say. I'm trying to see if anybody watching live heard it before I say what it is. So I'll give them a second. Did you guys hear what he said? Two things that he said. Now, and by the way, for those listening on the audio podcast, I have to say, if I didn't describe it enough, Nicodemus is kind of crying. He's moved by what Jesus says, and he starts to get down on his knees, and he grabs Jesus' hand. So people are saying no. I'll let you listen one more time and see if you can hear it. Now, I can barely hear it even sitting here, so I'm sure you can. He's getting down. So if you didn't hear it, you could see it visually if you're watching. When Jesus moves his hand out, he says, "You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that." Now, not the Jesus I see in the New Testament. I'm just here to tell you. When people bowed down, Jesus didn't rebuke them for it. Peter did, by the way. Our Catholic friends have yet to grasp that. But when people bowed down before Jesus, he did not rebuke them. He didn't say anything like that. Yeah, people are saying they can't hear it, but that's what he says. And I don't know. I'm going to try to turn it up, but it may get too loud. Let's see here. I'm going to turn it way up here. Try to listen. He's going to say, when you see him stick his hand kind of out like this, it's, "You don't have to do that." And then the next thing he says, a few seconds later, he says, "What are you doing?" That's just comical to me. For Jesus, someone to bow down. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It's just comical, if nothing else. Now, I realize it's not funny because it's a very different picture of Jesus. I get that. But it's comical in the sense that it's absurd, because that's not what Jesus did in the New Testament. All right, so two things he says. You don't have to do that, and what are you doing? What are you doing? Did you hear it?
kiss the sun.
Yeah, I don't know how to make it any louder, but you can go look at the clip yourself and on YouTube or whatever, and you could listen to it better than you can coming from my screen. That's what he says. He says, "You don't have to do that," and then he says, "What are you doing?" And I think I would just assume that they personally chose not to get that audio too loud. Now that's wild to me. Now it shows me that they're taking too many freedoms. Now I don't know if I got something else here. I don't think I do. I think that was it. Now, I've heard of other things that I don't have here, but there's one part where he says, I'm going to start a revolution. Jesus never said he was starting a revolution. Now, he was establishing a kingdom, but he doesn't need to say that. Now, one thing that was controversial, and I don't like it either, they're at the wedding, and so I guess in the show, Andrew is kind of a bad dancer. And they're trying to make, I know what they're trying to do. At least I think I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to make Jesus look more human and relatable other than just what you get out of the New Testament. Well, I think that's very easy to take too many liberties with that. But I don't mind a smile here and there or, little lighthearted jokes that don't have so much significance. But so at one point, somebody says, hey, Jesus, can you make Andrew a better dancer? And Jesus says, there's some things even I can't do. And a lot of people didn't like that. And I get why. And I'm just not sure. I get it that it's a joke and they're trying to make him look jokey, but why don't you have anything in the Bible with that kind of joke? I think it does more harm than good. I'm just going to tell you. So what's my point? My point is be careful with these shows out there. One like this is going to take a lot of liberties. And the reason it's significant because it has become so popular. And, a lot of people are going to learn about Jesus from shows like this. Now, that's their fault. It's not the show's fault, but the show doesn't help. And the show is feeding into the fact that people don't read their Bibles. I've watched, so the Bible movies, the Jesus movies that I think are the best, and I haven't seen a ton of them. I don't like Jesus of Nazareth. I don't like The Greatest Story Ever Told. That was a wild one. And do I have to say it? Of course not. The Last Temptation of Christ, blasphemy and baloney. But there was one, I think it was The Greatest Story I've Ever Told. I'm not sure. Which one had Charlton Heston as John the Baptist? John the Baptist, and the soldiers are coming to arrest him, and he's saying, repent! And he's like trying to dunk them underwater like you force someone to be baptized. That's comical to me. But the only ones I liked the Gospel of John. I talked about that earlier because it follows the story. Now, again, I don't mind some ad-libs, but this movie only follows the text. Okay, well, I talked about the Passion of the Christ earlier, actually. So very quickly, I think it did a better job of communicating the seriousness and the reality of the crucifixion. But I talked about the Catholic influence behind it, and which was very obvious. But it's not a terrible movie. Some of that demon stuff with the kid and, that with the little weird-looking demon child, it was unneeded. Yeah, so you can go back and check my thoughts on that. But I like Mel Gibson. Oh, by the way, did you hear he's making a sequel about the resurrection? So there you go. I heard him say it. He was making it. Now, there's a new show. It's rising in popularity, by the way, about David. It's called The House of David. Don't know nothing about it. I'm hoping it has some good behind it. But anyway, the Gospel of John. And the Gospel of John is one of a few different Bible movies that follows the text with Jesus' story. There's another one called the Gospel of Matthew. I didn't like it because the Jesus is like a clown in the movie. They couldn't help themselves. This actor, and from what I hear, the actor's choice was to do it himself. So if you can't go wrong with the words because you're following the Bible, well, you can go wrong visually. And so he's trying to act all laughy all the time. And at one point he's talking about, if your brother has a beam in his eye and he takes some stick or something, I can't remember, and puts it up to his eye and you can hear the crowd laughing and he's cheering them on. It's like, no, I don't think so. No. I get it. I don't mind being entertained by these movies. I'm not saying ad lib is not necessarily bad or a terrible thing if it's done without changing things. And what movies like this seem to do is they leave out so much of what they could use and they just add their own stuff. So I don't have a high view of it already. So those are my thoughts on it. Be careful with these shows. Oh, I know one thing that I was gonna play. And we're getting near the end of my podcast here. But why movies do this when they don't have to, I just don't get. And some shows, they're not even trying to hide it. Like the Noah Ark movie with Russell Crowe, that was horrible. I didn't even watch it. but we all know what's in it. You know, he's a homicidal. Yeah, if Noah was a homicidal maniac, I could see going and watching the Noah's Ark movie. And if you want to see rock creatures coming out of the rocks, yeah, you could go see that. But The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. Now, it's not a terrible movie. It's a classic. It's from the 50s, and it was a phenomenal movie as far as movies being made. And, of course, the acting, don't get me started. Charlton Heston, of course. But, again, for a long time, for a lot of people, older generations, I don't even know if younger people even know about the movie anymore, but it used to be played every year. For decades, it was one of the biggest Bible movies there was, the Ten Commandments. It was huge, 3-hour movie. But even when the director himself, Cecil B. DeMille, came out in the beginning of the movie to talk and wanted to tell you that he found it so significant to follow the movie itself, or the story, I mean, to follow the original story. Here's what he said.
Same battle.
And I don't know if you could hear, it's an old audio, you know. I got the end of his little monologue here at the beginning of the Ten Commandments movie. This is the director.
Same battle continues throughout the world today. Our intention was not to create a story, but to be worthy of the divinely inspired story created 3,000 years ago, the 5 books of Moses.
So hear what he said. He said, our intention is not to create a story, but to just retell the story. Now, it's significant that he says that. Hear it again.
Our intention was not to create a story, but to be worthy of the divinely inspired story created 3,000 years ago.
Except that he went on to create his own story. So that's exactly what he did. Now, there's nothing terrible, I suppose. I mean, by and large, the movie is okay. But there's a lot of things that are wrong about that movie. The worst one, I think, that I can remember is when it comes to the death of the firstborn of Egypt. The way the movie tries to present it is if God was leaving it to Pharaoh to decide what that last plague was going to be. And so Pharaoh comes up with this idea because he's mad at Moses, let all the firstborn of the Hebrews die. And then Moses hears about it and he says from his own mouth, he's, caused his own children to die. That's not what happened in the Old Testament. No, God said ahead of time, no, I'm going to kill his firstborn. I guess the movie, Cecil B. DeMille, was wanting to get God out of this light of, like it was his idea to kill the firstborn. No, it was actually Pharaoh's, according to the movie, and God just, it's unfortunate. God had only said, well, whatever you decide is going to be the plague on you. But no, it's just, and there's so many things wrong about that movie. Nothing so significant that it's like I can't, and it's an okay movie for a Bible movie. But the other thing is Moses was not a good speaker in the Old Testament, but of course Charlton Heston, of course, he's a great speaker. And even though they try to say it ahead of time, well, I don't want to speak. Who am I to? But yet he does most of the talking, and as an eloquent speaker at that, of course, he's Charlton Heston, so they couldn't have that. But that's not accurate, of course. Moses was kind of a reserved man, and the Pharaoh, the relationship between the Pharaoh and Moses from the beginning, but according to the Bible, the real Pharaoh that was persecuting Moses died by the time Moses comes back into Egypt. No, it's not the way it was in the Bible. And in the Bible, Moses somehow already knew he was a Hebrew, but in the movie, he kind of discovers it all of a sudden. But anyway, my whole point is this. I just don't know why they need to take these kinds of liberties when they've got the story. I get some ad-libbing. Now, I've already recommended certain movies that I think are really good. Here's one of my favorites is the movie called Joseph with Ben Kingsley and Paul, I don't remember his last name, but Ben Kingsley in it. And it's got Martin Landau. That's a great movie. Now, it has some ad-lib, actually, it's got a lot of it, but it brings a lot of extra dialogue, but it keeps the spirit, and it puts a lot of what's in there, and great acting. And so if we're just talking about movies, I recommend Joseph with Ben Kingsley and Martin Landau. I don't remember the Paul guy, Paul Mercurio or something like that. A lot of good acting. It does change some things that I thought that's not right, but by and large, it's very accurate. And the scene when he reveals himself to his brothers in the movie, and it's a long movie because it was a TV series, a miniseries. But the scene where he reveals himself to the brothers is so moving. And you just, when you're watching, you're like, I bet it was very much like this. And so I recommend that movie. That's a Bible movie to watch. And they took some liberty where you could see that Potiphar was kind of trying to sympathize because he didn't trust his wife. So he kind of trusted Joseph in the movie. You don't read about that in the Bible. And so it took a little liberty there, but somehow it turned out okay. Anyway, all right, so that's the thing. So those are my thoughts. I appreciate you guys watching and being a part of this. Again, look for me on X, AK Richardson 2. Look for these podcasts if you like to listen to these things. Spread the word, subscribe, tell people about the channel. And yes, April 10th, my debate with James White in person. It will be viewable live, of course, Parish of the Redeemer YouTube channel, Trey Fisher. I'll be sending out that link when I get it. And it's going to be on Romans chapter 9. It's good to be back. As best I can, I will do this live weekly. So you guys have been asking, and you guys have really been, and concerned, but I'm okay. And how did my debate come about? Jeremiah Nortier. He got me connected with Trey Fisher, and he's someone I debated. He knows James White and knew about that. So I have Jeremiah Nortier from the Apologetic Dog YouTube channel to thank for that. I think he secretly just wants to see me get hammered by James White. James White's a great debater, one of the best. I don't believe I'm going to get hammered because I believe James White is wrong, but he's very smart. And and so James White is he's probably from what I believe and from what I've heard, James White is one of the best Calvinist defenders out there, and he's a phenomenal debater. This is going to be like his 196th or 197th debate. So I don't know when I'll be doing a live call in. I used to do that, or maybe sometime, maybe some other. I'll do other videos on YouTube besides these podcasts. Okay. So, but anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for being a part of this. Spread the word if you think it's useful information here. God bless you. Good day.